Mogul, but maybe you can give me some details as to why that's such a valid explanation.
It wasn't just one balloon, it was a string of 20 to 30 weather balloons, followed by an extensive payload, followed by maybe half a dozen radar reflectors. It was an extensive operation.
Originally, Project Mogul used long strings of rubber weather balloons to carry microphones and radio transmitters. These tools were sent high into the atmosphere to listen for sound waves from Soviet missile and bomb tests.
This is probably close to 700 feet long, which is, greater than half the height of the Eiffel Tower.
But would it really look like debris? I mean, these guys clearly described very strange debris that they've never seen before.
As part of the payload dropped off, the balloon could rise again, the winds could drag it, it could fall again. It could create multiple type of debris sites, or an extensive debris field for that matter.
So this might explain these multiple crash sites.
Absolutely, sure.
If the Mogul balloon is the real explanation for Roswell, then eyewitnesses who handled the debris should be able to identify the mylar foil used in the radar reflectors. But many describe a strange memory metal that is both lightweight and able to return to its original form. What did these witnesses handle? At WonderWorks, a special effects house located in Los Angeles, Bill has brought in 2 eyewitnesses for the test. Earl Fulford, who claims to have handled the debris at the alleged first crash site, and Jesse Marcel Jr., who says he handled material when his father, Major Jesse Marcel, brought some of the debris home from the crash site.
We've collected a number of different materials that seem to match roughly the descriptions from our 2 witnesses. We're going to bring in each witness independently and see if they can positively ID the material they were handling back in 1947.
I got a handful of different metals here. We're starting off with 32,000s magnesium. Same with steel, aluminum, also steel, but this isn't 5,000s. You can see it's quite flexible and flat. This is actually cardboard at 32,000 and 5,000s acetate with kind of an aluminum finish to it. And this is mylar, also with aluminum film to it.
Earl, the first subject, is brought in to look at the materials.
Take a turn on each piece and tell me yes or no, does it look or feel like the piece of metal from 1947?
No. It's a little too thick.
Let's do the next one.
This one is too heavy. The color is close, but weight is too much.
Okay.
This material now was almost weightless.
Let's do the next one.
Too stiff. This one is closer, but it doesn't feel like I could fold it up. This one doesn't resemble it in any way. This one feels more like the material. The material we got, we could wad up and it would pop back just about like that's doing now.
You just when you feel like the thickness is about right, the weight.
The thickness and the weight.
And the stiffness.
Makes chills run down my back.
And let's get this last one.
Definitely not.
You mentioned something that was really intriguing to me, which is this idea that you tried to crumple it up, put it back in your bag. Can you try actually doing it and see if you can get that same effect?
You got something there. That's definitely as close as what I've seen.
The acetate seems to be a close match for what Earl experienced. But according to the official Roswell report released in 1994, this type of acetate was not used in the construction of Project Mogul balloons. Only acetate tape was used, which bears no resemblance to the form of acetate being tested. But if a balloon didn't crash at Roswell, what did? Another eyewitness may confirm or deny the findings so far.
Well, we have one more witness, one of the most famous of the Roswell witnesses, Jesse Marcel Jr.
The night that my dad brought the material home, I looked at all this material on the floor. The first thing he said was, look at this, because you'll probably never see this again.
Now remember, this is a blind test, so let's not lead on about any of these early findings with Earl.
This is a sheet metal. Now what I saw was not really like a sheet metal, more like foil, so this is much too thick.
Too thick.
Now these are sheet metal. What I saw the foil was not sheet metal. This is getting close to the feeling of the thickness of it. It was not as shiny as this, though. It was a little more dull than this, but this is closer to the actual thickness.
Let's have a look at this one last.
Okay. Now this is very insubstantial. This is like a real thin foil. The foil that I saw was much thicker than this, but it had about the same weight, though. It was thicker, but about the same weight.
Almost weightless.
As this. It's almost weightless, like it'd float down like that in air.
Right.
But does the acetate also display the memory metal properties that Jesse's father described?
You want to try and crumple it?
Doesn't stay crumbled.
Is that what he described?
Yeah, this is basically what he described.
Unbeknownst to either of them, both Earl and Jesse have identified acetate as the material closest to what they handled back in July 1947.
The amazing thing is that both of them zeroed right in on the acetate. It's plain as day to me that they both found the thickness, the malleability, and the overall weight of the acetate to be like a one-to-one match. This has been really productive. When you think of people back in 1947 handling acetate, that sounds like a pretty revolutionary material back then.
That's the amazing thing for me, is that it was the simple solution. We kept looking for something more exotic.
Acetate is a popular component in film stock, adhesive tape, and synthetic fabrics. As early as 1910, it was used as a glue-like liquid to coat and strengthen fabric aircraft wings and fuselages. But acetate in a strip or sheet form was not used in any known aircraft in the 1940s.
There's no acetate in a Project Mogul balloon. So what did we prove today? We did prove something. We proved that two witnesses who didn't know each other, who were there at the time, identified the exact same material.
If the unknown material handled by eyewitnesses was acetate, is it from an entirely different classified project? This strange artifact could shed more light on what happened at two different sites in New Mexico in 1947.
It must have been an explosion.
Two eyewitnesses who claim to have handled debris in Roswell have identified acetate as the closest match for what they saw in 1947. But acetate was never used in a Project Mogul balloon. In effect, these witnesses have all but eliminated the government's Mogul balloon explanation. So the question still remains, what crashed in 1947, and what was it made of? If the second crash in San Agustin is truly linked to Roswell, the final analysis of this artifact may hold the answers. Ted brings the artifact to SEAL Labs in Los Angeles, and Dr. Aaron Kumar, a metallurgy and sample processing expert, for a closer examination.
I brought the specimen in. We're looking forward to showing it to you. Here it is.
Wow, what is it?
This came out of an archaeological dig, and the site may have been a crash site. We're not sure. This is one of the more unusual or difficult to explain artifacts that came up out of the site.
It does look pretty unusual.
And we're just trying to get a sense of what it could be. Is it organic? Is it man-made? Is it natural?
Well, we'll test it and figure this out. I think we should do a variety of tests on this.
These tests will help prove conclusively what the object is made of. The artifact is smooth to the touch, and at just 4 ounces is extraordinarily lightweight. But initial looks reveal several cracks and folds that suggest there may be multiple layers to the object.
You see there's all kinds of folds and sort of crevasses. Have you ever seen anything like this before?
Nothing of this shape and form. Obviously, it looks pretty unusual.
You know, cracked open areas of fissures might have some material down inside that we could pull out.
Right.
While Ted and Dr. Kumar take a closer look inside the object, 2 samples of the artifact are tested to determine what the object is made of, as well as its melting point. Knowing what temperature is needed to melt the object could give a clue as to the conditions that led to it taking this form.
We have this object here which we need to examine in the electron microscope.
Also, if in some of these crevasses, there looks to be some bits of material or a powder down there.
Ted and Dr. Kumar locate a few particles to examine from inside the object. Running these particles through the scanning electron microscope shows a breakdown of its basic elements.
Okay, so what we see here is a large amount of oxygen and carbon, which will be component from the organic material. And it also contains quite a bit of filler material, so to say. A bit of this material comes from sand and soil and dirt as well.
Nothing anomalous is found from the particle inside the object. But the results of the artifact's makeup prove surprising.
Hey. Hi.
What did you find?
I got a nice clean spectrum, and it's ran through the database, and it's clearly polyethylene.
Polyethylene.
And even more so, it has a high melting point that is about 130 degrees C, which means it's high-density polyethylene.
What would that come from? What would be common containers or?
Tupperware.
But HDPE, or high-density polyethylene, isn't used commercially in products like Tupperware until the early 1960s. And the material itself isn't officially invented until 1953, 6 years after the alleged crashes at Roswell and San Augustine. If Art Campbell found the artifact at the site of the second crash, it either found its way to the middle of the desert sometime after 1953, or it's part of a crash that happened 6 years before its invention. Today, HDPE is not only used in commercial products, but also to make fuel tanks and aircraft windows. How could something with such a high melting point become so deformed?
This was found in the desert in New Mexico, which is hot, but nothing gets that hot.
That's 250 degrees Fahrenheit, something like that?
Even in direct sunlight. So we know this didn't melt just based on environmental conditions.
Correct.
It must have been put into a fire or an explosion or something to elevate its heat.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
Project Mogul didn't use acetate or any other material like it. And now the remote site of a second crash contains material that may have been in an explosion.
We know the desert environment in that area never gets over 110, 120 degrees Fahrenheit, but we also know that HDPE doesn't melt below 130 Celsius. So I wonder, how did this object get melted in the desert there? It would have to have been something like a fire or an explosion to reach those temperatures.
This provides an entirely new perspective. For years, the government denies anything happened at Roswell, but then admits to secret tests. Now, this physical evidence raises serious doubts about those final explanations.
When you put all the pieces together, multiple crash sites, credible witnesses that can finally come out and tell the truth after all these years, you have something that's just too big to be a simple cover-up of a military accident.
And the Mogul explanation also cannot account for Earl Fulford's sighting days before the crashes even occur.
Even before the UFOs hit the ground, they were there in the air. And for me, that explains the relationship among all these various crash sites.